Hello everyone, and welcome to this edition of Talking Local. If you haven't caught one of our previous Talking Local interviews, in this series I get together with some highly experienced and well-known figures from the local search industry. I want to find out how they work, what their insights into the industry are, what motivates them, what gets them out of bed every day. Today I'm joined by David Bayer, who is the CEO of chamberofcommerce.com, which is a very successful online directory and also a local services offering. David himself is a very successful entrepreneur. He started many businesses. I think he founded his first all back in 1995. So he's been around the block. He's seen a lot. And today I hope we can find out some fantastic insights for him. As well as running his own business, he also speaks at a lot of events. He's a writer, and he's also a personal development coach. So I have no idea how he's found the time today to join us, but we do thank him. David, how are you doing, and where are you today?
Hey, Miles. Thanks for that intro. I appreciate it. I'm in Sarasota, Florida today. We're normally based in Orlando, but I'm working remotely, so I appreciate the time.
Well, no, I appreciate you giving us your time. You're obviously very busy. So with David's vast experience in the local data industry, in the local directory field, and with such a focus being put on citations and ensuring that local businesses have a kind of clean, consistent presence online, I'm very interested in understanding about the inner workings, of kind of directory services, the pressures that are on them, and how, us as search marketeers should look at them and use them to get the best out of them, and also, what does the future hold for the kind of local data and local data industry. So David's time is tight, so I'm going to jump into the first of today's questions. So David, you've worked in the local industry for a long time. How has the local data market changed over that time, and what are the things that someone in the local search industry should really know about the marketplace?
Well, I think in some regards it's changed a lot, and in some regards it hasn't changed at all. So, when I first started our business, which, our company is called DataBank, and chamberofcommerce.com is one online property that we own and operate. We launched a mortgage website called Personal Home Loan Mortgages, and I launched that out of my house at the time, and it was a $300 database of mortgage brokers. And within 90 days, we were ranking at the top of all major search engines for every mortgage term that was out there, in addition to the local long tail. And at that time, there wasn't a lot of competition because, larger organizations with a lot of authority, like a Bank of America or a Wachovia, understanding how search worked was a competitive advantage. And it's not, right? It's that knowledge has become commoditized, and so now larger organizations are dominating the search results. So, in that sense, things have changed quite a bit because we're not running a $300 database from China on chamberofcommerce.com right now. So it's we have multiple data partners, and we invest a lot in customer care for businesses that contact us that want to update their information, or that are no longer in business. And the quality of the data is still probably not as good as I would have expected it to be, 8 years ago.
So what are the different sources that you get your data from? Because obviously everyone is sort of almost verging on paranoid these days in the industry about making sure they get to source for the data, understanding how to affect the data correctly so that it doesn't get overwritten by another source that might have a higher priority. So what are the sources you get? What is the process that you go through in terms of analyzing, screening, filtering, and updating your database? If you could just give us an insight into that, that would be great.
Sure. So in my mind, I think it's important to understand that there are different types of organizations out there. I look at the local directory space as sort of having three tiers. There are sites out there that are really just spraying data on the web and hoping to consume as much Google or Yahoo Bing traffic as they can and monetize it, and they're not particularly concerned with the quality of data or the customer experience or the experience of the business owner. And then there's so those would be like third-tier directories, and there's second-tier directories, and that's where I put chamberofcommerce.com, where over time, we have limited resources. In fact, there's a lot I would like to do with our data, but as the web has evolved and the local directory space has evolved, I think it's become more and more challenging for second-tier directories to provide the type of quality data and quality service that ultimately they would like to. And then you've got first-tier data providers, and so we're in that middle space. We have a couple of different data provider sources. We have two major providers who are the underlying providers of our data, and then we also participate with a number of data publishers, and it's the usual suspects, right? It's the UBLs, it's the Yexts. There are some other organizations that see a value in having the citations on chamberofcommerce.com, and we work with them. And so we do our best to update the data as our underlying data providers provide us updated files. We do our best to provide as accurate a matching logic as we can for deduping. And it's always a challenge to I don't know, at least in our world, there really is nothing established in terms of who gets priority. I mean, to be candid, we do it based on the economics. So, if you've got multiple different providers publishing data to chamberofcommerce.com, whoever's paying us the most, that's the data that takes precedence. If the business owner comes in and is claiming, we always give that precedence because we've verified that it's the business owner. I think the instances of that are fewer and far between. So if you look statistically at any one of our partners, we always meet the service level agreements that we have in terms of the records that they push out to us being associated with them. Today it's still for us a very small percentage of businesses where you might have multiple providers trying to claim the same record. And I don't know what other organizations are doing around that. We've just sort of that's just how we handle it.
Okay, that's great. I mean, that is an interesting insight, and because I've heard, kind of counter comments saying that, even if you're a business owner who goes direct onto a site and kind of claims and verifies it, that may not be, the kind of point of truth, essentially, that it can be kind of overwritten by other sources. Do you think that, your approach is similar to others? And, if I'm an SEO and I'm looking, okay, where is this data coming from? If I go to a site and verify it directly, is that the best way of taking ownership of a listing, or am I still going to be at risk of another source trumping me?
I mean, I can't really speak for how other organizations handle their data. For us, ultimately, through the verification process we have with the business owner, which is more robust than some and less robust than others, we've decided to go ahead and give that precedence over any other source. But we probably get 3,000 to 5,000 businesses that add themselves to chamberofcommerce.com each month, and when you compare that to the amount of data that we're publishing to the site on behalf of our publishing partners, it's a very, very small percentage. I also, in the second tier category where we're operating, my hunch is that we probably give more attention to data than a lot of other second tier directories. I know a lot of them are currently up for sale. A lot of them have been hit big by Panda and Penguin, and there are other factors to consider, like having access to premium ad feeds. And so over time, I know a lot of second-tier directories had access, for example, to custom search ads from Google, and a lot of them don't anymore. So as the economics change, I think the attention to data ultimately changes. And I think over time that's okay, because when we talk about where the industry is going, I don't know how much of a role second-tier directories, even including chamberofcommerce.com, are going to have in sort of the local data sphere. So I think ultimately all that flushes out.
That's interesting that you said that a number of your kind of peers or competitors are up for sale. Do you think we're going to see a few kind of well-known names kind of dropping out, or do you think there's going to be consolidation, people kind of coming together, or buyouts? What do you think the sort of future is in the next, say, 12 months for that kind of second tier of market?
Well, the space is interesting. I don't know what type of acquisitions we're going to see, because I've seen some sites hanging out there for a while now. We've had conversations mostly around strategic partnerships, but it's given me a sense of what the appetite is for acquisition. And I think the second tier market's really been dependent on organic search. and that with the nature, I mean, Google's done a great job of really eliminating the opportunity for organizations to grow through acquisitions of sites that are predominantly driven by organic search. And that's everything from, you know, what they did in 2008, 2009 in the financial services sector with some acquisitions that Bankrate made, but they've made it clear that if you want to acquire more traffic off the search engine, you're going to buy it from Google. So I don't think there's an appetite, given the risk factor, for acquisitions of second-tier directories, especially when, you know, unless they have other assets, right? I mean, maybe they've got a database of 300, 400,000 local businesses, and they can show some traction in terms of engagement through email marketing. There's a value there. Or unless there's an underlying technology or a particular uniqueness to the data set. I don't see a lot of people being acquired, you know, just based on their traffic and the dollars that they're generating from ad revenue, or, you know, a small percentage of maybe, you know, premium recurring, you know, placement subscriptions on those sites. But the way I see it shaking out over time is like how we've seen it shake out in every industry, right? There's a consolidation. You do a local search on Google. You know, the other day I did a search for a video, and like the entire top of the fold was just the YouTube video in the organic search result, right? So the real estate is changing in terms of its layout. In local search, we have carousel. You have all the information for a business that shows up on the right-hand side when Google has that information. And so how many places do you really need? Do you need 50, 60 places that all tell you something about a business when only the top 10% of them are telling you anything unique in terms of review or information about the business? And so we've seen this in other sectors, right? I mean, this is kind of the natural evolution. Is it good in terms of entrepreneurship? You know, I don't know, right? Because we end up operating in a way around local information and business directories that's really only driven by, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 innovators, because it doesn't leave a lot of room for smaller participants to enter the market.
So obviously, I guess for anyone out there running a directory, it's a kind of tough time, and presumably those kind of points of consumption of that data is going to drop. So in fact, the aggregators may also sort of find a tougher time. But presumably, you know, kind of the kind of growth of mobile, you know, obviously kind of geolocatable sort of applications, and also kind of the vertical market in terms of becoming a specialist in a particular area. Do you see that those are the kind of the next generation of kind of local data consumption points, is around, you know, mobile apps and you know, kind of specialist services, specialist directories?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think organizations that are really artistic in how they weave data together can still be successful, you know, in this space. And, you know, the space is so horizontal and it's so active that I don't know everything that's going on, right? And, you know, for me personally, operating in the local data space is one of multiple things that I do. But, you know, it would be interesting to be able to, you know, mash up the information from OpenTable and social networks to see where my friends are eating right now, right? And that way I could, you know that at the Ravenous Pig, my friend John is having dinner, because that data is available, and I can make my restaurant selection based around where people are. Not necessarily because they're posting where they are on Facebook, but because we can overlay these data sets, right? So, so I do think there's some really interesting, innovative things that can still be done with local data. You know, and then the question comes up, which is, how is this going to affect, you know, directory listings management? Because if the directory listings management space consolidates, and it's not as important to be on chamberofcommerce.com in the way that it used to be, or on Brown Book or Yellow Book or City Squares or all of these other, you know, second-tier sites, how does that affect the service that is emerging about the idea that, hey, there's so many places across the web that you need to be listed, right? So these things have these ripple effects among other industries, and even now we're seeing entrants that, you know, in my opinion, are a little bit late to the game, right? It's like YP just came out with their reputation management product, but they're doing it at a time where I see the space starting to consolidate. And, you know, perhaps the need to be across 30 sites is not there anymore. I don't know. So I'm always fascinated by how the space evolves, and ultimately, in terms of the quality of data, all that will get sorted out, because Google should be able to see, even today if they choose to, Out of the 50 different points of distribution across the web, many of us are putting a date last modified. They could come to some sort of statistically relevant conclusion around which piece of information is accurate. And over time, that's going to get better and better and better. And ultimately, it's a very valuable space. I mean, I think Google's shown that that's the space that they want to own in terms of having the best information, their own reviews, and they've done what they do in every sector, where they aggregate everything at first and they feed everybody traffic, and then there's a little button that says upload your review into Google. And then once they have, a critical mass of information, the interface changes, and you're pretty much interacting with Google Local. So, I think it would be remiss to think that anything significantly different is going to happen in this space than what we've seen in travel, or what we've seen in shopping, or what we've seen in, in a lot of other spaces.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. They do have a habit of kind of cannibalizing the industry that they kind of piggyback off for so long. Switching tack a little bit, but kind of keeping on the kind of sort of local data point. You guys obviously work with Yext. We see a lot of questions come in, a lot of chat about Yext, about the sort of value of the service. What is it like to be a Yext partner, and what kind of value do you think they bring to your business?
Well, I mean, Yext have been great partners of ours. I enjoy working with them as an organization. We do get a lot of complaints from local businesses about Yext because we do market their product, through various communications to, we have almost 100,000, businesses that we consider members, in the spirit of chamberofcommerce.com that receive email communications from us. And so from time to time, those are Yext, and we get a mixed bag of responses. So some people like Yext, and some people don't like anything. In terms of we're certainly happy, being a point of publishing for our partners, and appreciate the economics around it. I think there are a number of new entrants entering the space, and again, I don't know where they are in terms of being late, early, or right on time for the game. There's an economics that Yext sits in the middle of, where ultimately I think directory sites can provide more value to the larger organizations that are using Yext as a middleman, and at less cost than what the cost is to those large, like say a Yodel or a Reach Local or whoever's pushing out through Yext. So I think the economics aren't in favor necessarily of a directory site like Chamber, or a large organization that's managing 40,000 local businesses. But I think ultimately what they're paying for is the convenience of Yext, right? Because I've had multiple conversations where they say, look, we understand, because we can actually provide more value, for example, premium listings, right, on chamberofcommerce.com for those organizations. But ultimately it's their bandwidth to do integration and tracking and reporting and everything else. So Yext has found themselves in a really nice position where they've solved a pain point, in particular for enterprise level organizations, that they've gone out and done the API integration with all of us. And I really think that that's what Yext's value is today.
Yeah, but it certainly does kind of cut down the kind of time and effort involved, particularly if you're managing multiple locations.
Now, as a publisher, another question, Miles, is what's the impact on the site? So, and we're really just trying to understand that today, because the assertion has always been, in terms of bringing feeds into your site, not necessarily from Yext, but just in the industry, is that it's SEO neutral, right? And I'm not so sure. We're testing that right now, because, I don't know in terms of how Google looks at a site like chamberofcommerce.com, if the fact that we always have fresh data coming in is a positive signal, because we've got a lot of providers that are pushing data into us, or if that's being ignored because it's duplicate content, and that same information is being displayed across, Yellow Pages and Super Pages and everybody else. And at the same time, what priority we give that in the site, because right now, the decision we had made was to have Yext sit at the top layer of our site because they're rich in content. But but it may be that we can't compete in organic search against the more authoritative sites that are also displaying that same tier, and in fact we're better off taking the non-Yext listings and moving them up to the top, because we're trying to find, where can we fit into the traffic that's available through organic search. And we know that ultimately it comes down to quality and the right types of signals, and are people sharing the content on our website. But we do have the choice in terms of how we prioritize data on our website, and we're just recently starting to play around with that, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And I guess another question that all comes up about Yext is, there's a kind of annual recurring fee required to keep using Yext and required to kind of keep the data, at the endpoint, such as at chamberofcommerce.com. How does it work with you guys then? If someone if an end business is using Yext, they buy 1 year, they get a 12-month listing. If they don't renew, how does that affect the data that you have in your data set from Yext, and the data you display?
That listing, well, that's a good question. So if the listing was already on chamberofcommerce.com as, let's call it, a non-enhanced listing without all the additional information that Yext provides, it would revert back to that listing. And if the listing wasn't on the site, prior, then the listing would be removed from the site.
Okay, that's great. That just clarified what I thought it was. So that's really insightful. Thank you, Dave. I've got one final question. I love chamberofcommerce.com. It's a great site. I know you're evolving it into become more of a sort of services platform for kind of local businesses and local agencies. Just tell us a little bit about the new direction you're taking it in.
Yeah, so I think it's twofold. One is that we understand that we provide value for individual businesses or small internet marketing agencies or large internet marketing agencies in terms of having a point of presence on the web. So we're building feature sets into our platform to further accommodate the needs of our partners. We are particularly focused on becoming a place for publishing of content, both unique and syndicated content for local businesses. And we're starting to move a little bit more towards creating value around the location-based value that's not just around business directories and data. So, in the spirit of the brand of what a Chamber of Commerce is and what we're doing with chamberofcommerce.com, the idea is that you would be able to come to chamberofcommerce.com and see what types of local business meetups there are, business networking events there are in Orlando, or the jobs that are available in Orlando, or information around, we have an event in Orlando, for example, which is like, every Thursday all the businesses get together and there's business networking events. So really, like, becoming a resource at the local level. Today on Facebook, you really, as a local business, only communicate with people who already know about you. And on LinkedIn, there's not a lot of local business networking. It's more industry by industry. And so we see an opportunity to create a space within chamberofcommerce.com for local business networking and local business events.
It makes a lot of sense, adding a lot of value, and again, providing a service that maybe hasn't been kind of covered off by some of those kind of larger sort of social platforms. So, David, that's great. Thank you very much for kind of sparing the time with us today and for sharing your insights. Everyone, thank you very much for watching this installment of Talking Local, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.